Welcome to this Fundamentals Lesson Plan series on structural layout and design. In this video, we'll take a look at placing beam systems and braces. This is video 2 of 4. My name is John Harridge, and I'll be your host for today's lesson. Let's review the learning objectives for video 2. At the end of this lesson, you will be able to sketch boundaries for a beam system. Next, we'll set the orientation of the beam system so that the beams go in the correct orientation. Next, we'll set the spacing of the beams, set the member shape, and then create a framing elevation view so that we can place braces between two columns. With that, let's get started. Let's begin this exercise by opening up an existing project file. So go ahead and click open and then browse out to your tutorial folder. And let's open up the structural exercise 2 project file, please. If you receive a warning message, go ahead and ignore it. In this exercise, it's basically 2 steps. We create a beam system that acts as the floor joist to support the floor deck above. And then the second task is to create bracing to add additional rigidity to the structural framing system. So I'm just highlighting the beams on screen just for visualization and illustration purposes to let you know that we're going to create 2 discrete beam systems, one between grid line 1 and 2 and the other one between grid lines 2 and 4. Beam systems are a quick way to frame an area, and we're going to do this hands-on together. Let's get started. So beam systems tools are located on the structural tab in the structural panel. It's right there. Go ahead and select structural beam system. So scanning the options bar, you'll see that we can specify a couple things up front before we even create the boundary sketch. So for example, we can set the beam shape. So make sure it's set to 2 by 10. Moving over, we can also set the justification of the framing members. So let's make sure that's set to center. Moving over again to the right, we can also specify the layout rules. So there's multiple choices. The one that we're going to work with is maximum spacing. So go ahead and select maximum spacing. And then the field immediately to the right of that is the value that you set. So let's put in 1 space bar 6 to enter in 1 foot 6 inches as that value. Now we're going to be using the sketch boundary technique. So I'm just showing you where that's located. All right, go ahead and left click to select it. And by default, we're immediately placed into a sketch mode. We will be sketching what's called boundary lines. We need a closed loop. And then once that closed loop is completed, you would click on Finish Sketch to complete the process. So Line Tool is the default tool that's configured when you start the sketching mode. There are other choices available to you, and we'll take a look at one of those. Just scanning the options bar again. While we're in the sketch mode, we want to make sure that the chain box on the left-hand side is marked. Let's go ahead and choose Pick Supports, which means we're going to create a parametric relationship between the sketch line and a structural element down below. In this case, the beams are going to act as a host for the sketch. All right, so just by hovering carefully over that beam, if you left click, it'll actually create that magenta sketch line for you. And the double lines that you see in the middle of that first sketch is indicating the orientation direction of the beams. So the beams are going to be going top down on screen, if you will, in that orientation. Let's continue creating the sketch. Go ahead and left click on the adjacent beam to create that sketch line, and then go ahead and select the beam along grid line 2. And to close the loop here, we're going to manually draw the remainder of the boundary against the exterior wall there. So go ahead and pick up the line tool from the draw panel. Go ahead and start in the low right hand corner and work your way to the left. Again, you want to snap to the intersection of grid line 1 and the exterior wall face there. Now we can't accept a dirty intersection like that, so we need to clean up the intersection using the trim tool that's found in the modify panel. So you select the internal edges that we want to keep, and it trims the remainder. Go ahead and select modify to end the command. And the last thing we want to do is actually specify an elevation offset. So let's go ahead and type in -2 inches. Make sure the spacing is set to maximum spacing. Again, just confirm that the spacing value is set to 1 foot 6 inches. Go ahead and click apply. That just sets the properties. It doesn't create the geometry yet. So to do that, click on the Finish Sketch button, and the beam system is now generated. Let's repeat the process for the adjacent structural bay, if you will. Go ahead and choose Create Similar. Choose the sketch boundary method again. Go ahead and select Pick Supports. Let's go ahead and start the sketch along grid line 2 as the starting sketch. So left click once you acquire that beam. That creates the first sketch and also sets the direction of the framing. Okay. Let's continue clockwise here. Go ahead and select the next beam. Select the third beam and select the fourth beam. Again, just like before, we'll manually draw the remainder of the boundary along the edge of the exterior wall. So go ahead and pick up the line tool. And starting in the lower right hand corner along grid line 4, go ahead and trace the exterior face of the outside wall. And when you get to the other side, you might want to zoom in, just to let you know there is a small offset at that location. So let me zoom in to show you that. Next, we'll go back over to the starting point and clean up that intersection again. So use the trim tool found in the modify panel. Go ahead and select the inside edges to keep, and it trims away the remainder. Okay, that completes that boundary sketch. Let's go ahead and set its elevation offset properties. This needs to be set to -9 inches. Again, we're using the same properties as before. Maximum spacing set to 1 foot 6 inches. Click Apply. Let's go ahead and finish the sketch. Beam system is generated. Go ahead and hit the escape key twice to end the command. Your layout should look similar to what you see on screen. Okay, let's open up the Framing Cutaway 3D view just to take a look at it in 3D. Now the floor decking system is covering up our beams that you can see pre-highlighted there with my cursor. So if you zoom in carefully or move your cursor over to the edge of the floor and left click to put it in a selection set, you'll actually turn on the transparency mode, if you will, temporarily, so you can actually see the beams, or joists in this case, underneath the floor system. That looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and hit the escape key twice to clear the current selection set. And next we'll move on to completing the exercise by placing bracing. So bracing requires a dedicated view called a framing elevation view. So to kick that off, we will open up the deck framing floor plan view, and we're going to create a framing elevation between grid line 2 and 3 at grid line A. So to start this process, go to the View tab, and where you see elevations, click on the pull down menu, and we want the second one called framing elevation. Go ahead and select it. Scanning the options bar, we want to make sure that this is attached to a grid. And then carefully hovering your cursor over grid line A between grids 2 and 3, you'll see it preview, and then to actually create it, left click at that location. Okay, so the elevation marker is now permanent, and the question is, where is the elevation view stored in Project Browser? So if we look at the stock elevation views, it's not located there. And just confirming it's not a section type, but let's go in the other elevation folder, and there it is. So go ahead and double left click to open up the framing elevation. Now we need to clean this up. What you're seeing is the crop region boundary that I'm pre-highlighting there. We need to dial that back into where our framing exercise is. So if you left click on the boundary and drag the shape handles in or downwards, if you will, that will help with the top offset for that boundary. And then I'll reselect the boundary, and we want to drag the left and right edges outwards just a bit so we can actually see the columns fully when we turn on the two-line representation mode. So right now the columns are showing as a stick symbol. Let's fix that. In the View Control toolbar, go to your detail level and go ahead and set that to medium. All right, so we can cleanly see the columns, and again we're going to create cross bracing between those two columns. Bracing is its own tool, and that's located on the Structure tab in the Structure panel. Go ahead and start the bracing tool. In the type selector, let's go ahead and set the shape to 2x4 dimensional lumber. Braces are drawn like line work. You pick a starting point and an end point. So for this one, we'll start at grid line 3 at the top of that column, and then select the base of column 2. Now let's go ahead and repeat the process for the bracing in the other direction. So start at the top of column 2 and then select the base of column 3. And then select modify to end the command. Now technically the bracing is in the same plane, but for this purpose it's okay. Technically you may want to offset that in the XY direction so that they're not overlapping. So opening up the framing cutaway 3D view, that's our end result. It looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and save the file as a new project. And let's give it the name Structural Exercise 2 Finished. Click Save after you give it a name. This concludes this exercise. Let's take a look at next steps. Let's review the learning objectives for video 2. In this lesson, you were able to sketch a boundary for a beam system, set the orientation of the beam system, set the spacing and member shape properties for the beam system, and then the second task was to create a framing elevation to then place braces between those columns. With that, let's take a look at Autodesk resources that are available to you. I would like to make you aware of two Autodesk resources. The first resource is the Autodesk Education Community, where you can access free software for both students and educators for titles like Autodesk Revit featured in this series. The website address is www.students.autodesk.com. Registration is required to access the free software using either your personal email address or your school-issued email address. The second resource is the Autodesk Digital STEAM Workshop. It's hands-on, project-based learning across multiple industries such as architecture, engineering, and entertainment. The website address is www.digitalsteam.autodesk.com. Registration is required to download the free learning resources using your Autodesk ID created from the Autodesk Education Community. You will find the Fundamentals of Architecture series under the Subject pull-down menu, Architecture link. Assets include step-by-step instructions, datasets, and videos. This concludes this lesson overview summary. Thank you for watching.